10 years from now, there will be far stricter rules on internet media use in the classroom than what I'm proposing.
Welcome to The Moment from WLNS Plus, the show where we dig into the decisions shaping Michigan politics. My guest for today is Republican Mark Tisdel. He represents the Rochester area in the Michigan House and is behind one of the most talked about bills this session, a proposal dealing with student cell phone use in schools. We're going to talk about why he decided to take on phones in the classroom, how it fits into the broader debate over student behavior and learning, and why he thinks bipartisanship is the key to success. This is my conversation with Mark Tisdel.
This cell phone bill,
Yes.
it's great. It's great. I mean, a lot of people think it's great. It's funny. I have.
Well, we could end the interview right here. It's
Right,
great.
yeah,
We're out of here. We're done.
Speaking of my wife's family, actually, so her family is like all teachers,
Mm.
and I like did a poll, like a random. It wasn't anything special, but I polled them, and I asked them all, like, what do you think about this bill? I was just, obviously just curious, and resounding applause.
Yeah.
Because I think that teachers were looking for something like this, and nobody's district really wanted to enforce anything, or it was kind of a school by school basis. Let's see what gets done here. But now there's something that's going to be at least some sort of standard for all of the schools to follow, and then if they wanted to add something else, they could, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't even a school by school basis. It was a classroom by classroom basis, and every school had a cell phone policy. Every school district had a policy, but without the backing of the principals, the teachers were reluctant to strictly enforce because they'd get pushback from the students and maybe the students' parents. If they got pushback from the students' parents, then maybe they didn't have the principal's backing, and the principal might not give their backing because they didn't have the superintendent's backing, and the superintendent didn't give the principal's backing because they didn't have the elected school board's backing. So this takes all of that responsibility for being the ones, to apply the enforcement. It takes all that responsibility off of their backs, and now it's state law, and we're going to comply with the law, and this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah, I think it is interesting too, because you see a lot of, the parents obviously are probably going to have, they're worried about, in case of emergencies, and I think there is an emergency exception built into the bill. Is that right?
There sure is.
And I think that, I don't know. I think that at the end of the day, I don't know if because they are distracting. And I remember as a kid and I graduated high school in 2014. So it's been a bit, I can only imagine that cell phones have gotten more prevalent as time has gone on. Right.
Yeah. I graduated high school before that.
Lucky
but,
you.
Yeah. But no, it's a relatively new phenomenon, but when you graduated in 2014, so the first forward-facing camera for selfies was the iPhone 4.
Right.
And that really started to sell in 2011.
Right.
And then Facebook took over Instagram.
Right.
And of course, that's all image-based. And that's when it really started to accelerate. So by 2014, 2015, and that's when researchers really saw it in the colleges. That's when the cell phone culture, even the cancel culture, really started to take hold. So it is a relatively new phenomenon in the scope of things. So we're just catching up a little bit. We're recognizing that there are problems associated with social media overexposure, overuse, and the U.S. Surgeon General calls that over 3 hours a day. More than half of teenagers are on 5 hours plus a day.
Oh, yeah.
And half of them are on between midnight and 5 a.m. So it's still a relatively new phenomenon, and like I say, it's just taken time for thoughtful regulation to come up to speed.
Whenever I think about cell phones in the classroom, I think back to when I was in 8th grade. I had a teacher. I like to listen to music. I was
Yeah.
big into music. Huge. When I was a kid, it was Green Day and Blink 182. So a lot of punk, a lot of
Green Day was just on the Super Bowl.
I know.
Everything old is new again, I guess.
Right,
You know?
exactly. I'm like, it's not long before this band is classic rock.
That's right.
That's
right.
And but I just remember, I was walking I would always listen to music in between periods. I'd try not to let it, obviously, once the classroom would start, I'd take the headphones out and everything.
Yeah.
But I remember in between periods, I was on my way to class, and one of the teachers, she was a little older, and she was like, "I get your headphones out of your, head or whatever,"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, this classroom's not, I don't know. It was just I just remember as a kid thinking how ridiculous that was, and I can imagine the pushback from students, obviously. But I do think that it has become a problem.
Well, just to your point, the music, listening to music is very different than the social media
sure.
environment today. And research will tell you that even when the kids use their cell phones in between class and they're going on to social media for that um, peer approval, peer comparison, social contagion that goes on in that world, it can take them up to 15 to 20 minutes to recalibrate and refocus on what's at hand. So even though the bill to get passed and to generate support, um, allows for use in between classes, even that can have a lingering distraction effect that's gonna be a negative.
And last year, you actually wanted to ban it, a full classroom ban. Is that correct?
Yeah, the gold standard is a bell-to-bell prohibition. That morning bell rings, you put the phone away. The dismissal bell rings in the afternoon. You can get them out and be on your way. And that is the gold standard. The leading sociologists, psychologists, that's just they're advocating a phone-free school. And so this is a step in that direction, and it will be a significant step and a very helpful step. But so we're prohibiting smartphones. Basic phones are available all day.
Interesting.
Basic phones aren't the problem. You make a phone call, you put it away.
So if theoretically, if a parent wanted to get their kid a burner, it'd basically be that's
Yeah.
basically what it would be, right?
Yeah.
Is they could get them a burner phone, maybe I don't know what that would cost, maybe like $10 a month or so, or I don't know what they sell them for now.
Well, the units you can get a very nice one for $250. And I call them a basic phone because they look just like an iPhone.
Oh,
So if your
they just don't have
image
the apps.
that's no internet connection. It doesn't support third-party applications.
Got it.
So you can have that all day long. You make your phone call, you put it away. The smartphones, you never put it away because there's so many other things, entertaining things
Right.
that you can do with it. And so, but that's the idea, is to get that part out of our academic lives.
Mhm.
And uh, the schools that have gone this route, none of them say, hey, you know what, let's have those back in the classroom. It's not even a consideration. And the
Right.
kids get it too. There was a Pew Research survey came out, gosh, maybe just 2 or 3 weeks ago. 43% of teenage students agree that smartphones should be out of the schoolroom.
Yeah, I remember. I think I've read studies about foreign countries that have done this abroad, and they have great results with
Yeah.
it. I think, and I want to key into that too. I think it is interesting, right? Because you have, on the one hand, right, there's this discussion about what should be the responsibility of the parents to leverage, and what should be when is state intervention necessary? How do you toe that line between parental responsibility and action and intervention.
And that was one of the other pushbacks. The school districts can do this right now without us. They don't need to be told by the state how to run their district. And so if you're seeing a failure to address the issue, which we are, the state has a $20 billion interest in what goes on in K through 12 education. So we're paying that kind of ching into the system. We've got an opportunity to come in and make some demands and make sure that the taxpayers are getting the greatest return on their investment. And an obvious distraction is just one of those things that can be eliminated.
Did you get any pushback from Republicans?
Yes.
You did. And
Sure.
what was at what point did you convince them?
Well, it took a long time. My first draft on this I wrote in June of 2023. So I've been working at this for a while, both sides of the aisle. And, the other side of the aisle was initially concerned that maybe the teachers' unions wouldn't like it, or the superintendents wouldn't like it. And then, my side of the aisle was, well, that's none of the state's business. We're just sending more mandates to the local governments. And again, I get that, but there are 537 local school districts, 56 intermediate school districts, 293 academies and charter administrations. That's 886. You wait for them to all design, implement, and come up with their own enforcement systems.
Right, and some of them are going to be...
You're going to be waiting a long time.
Right.
And if you get any pushback from the parents, particularly in some smaller communities, you can very easily see where the superintendent or the principals would say, forget it. This is not
It's
a fight.
not worth the effort.
This is not a fight I want to die, a hill I want to die on.
Right.
So that's one of the benefits of making it a statewide standard. It takes that part of it away.
I know that this is kind of just social media in general for teens is a pretty big discussion, right? It's a hot debate. And I'm sure you saw in Australia, they actually, eliminated social media for everyone under the age of 16. And that, I mean, we're seeing how that's doing. I think that it's having some form of positive impact as far as we can see. I'm wondering, I know you're working on other bills that would go to do something like that. Is that something that maybe an under 16 ban on social media for teens, would that be something that you would be interested in, or is it something else?
Well, I have another bill pending, House Bill 4388. And what that would do is it would require age verification to open an account or keep an account open if you're a minor.
Okay.
If you go on to any of the social media sites, you want to open an account, you have to click that you agree to their terms of use agreement.
Of course.
Well, the terms of use agreement is a legally binding contract. Now, where else do we allow minors to consent to a contract?
I mean, the only thing I can think of is college, but I mean,
Well,
if you're
even
17,
there,
but that at that point you probably need your parents.
Absolutely, and that's the biggest part of the problem. And I always talk about the consolidation of accountability and responsibility. There are social pathologies, mental health pathologies associated with social media exposure. The parents are going to be the ones financially, emotionally, psychologically responsible for picking up the pieces on the back end. But they don't have any authority on the front end. Well, when your responsibility exceeds your authority, that's a bad position to be in. We're going to hold you responsible, but we're not going to allow you any input in the outcome. So the bill recombines authority along with responsibility for the parents, it recognizes basic contract law that minors cannot consent to a legally binding contract. So the parental consent is required up front. The parents have access to all of the log information. They can go into the site anytime they want, see the posts, see the contact list, see the instant messages, see the replies, just see what their kids are doing online. Instagram has a program called Supervision, but they give veto power to the minor. Both the parent and the minor have to agree in order to turn this feature on. And all it does there is it allows the parents to come in and see the contact list. It's not necessarily the contact list that's a problem. It's what are you talking about with your contact list? And I use the analogy, go down to the city park, and we're going to take a large square foot area and put an 8-foot high opaque fence around it and only allow teens and tweens to enter. No adults. You let your kids go in there? The answer is no.
Probably not. Yeah,
Probably
right.
not.
Now I want to make a quick pivot, right? So, from my understanding, I'm pretty sure I read this, that you studied journalism in college. Is that correct?
I did radio and TV production.
That's
Yeah.
that's awesome. So now you're back doing exactly what you were born to do.
just a few years later.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to know, right, how you see the relationship, especially now, between the press and politics now that you're on the other side.
Well, I don't envy the job that the press has, print, radio, television. There's such competition out there for eyeballs. And so it's absolutely necessary for survival to almost lead with the most dramatic interpretation of whatever happened on any particular day, in order to attract viewers and have something to sell to advertisers. And so they're under that kind of pressure, whereas before there might have been an opportunity to go in depth a little bit, bring up some background information, and all the time there's much more across the aisle cooperation in the Capitol than is reported. But that's not exciting news, right? No one called anyone a name today. Well, okay. Well, nothing to report then. But we got three good things done. Well, yeah, but everybody was in agreement. Or the other thing you'll find is, like my bill, it was in the Senate, it was 34-1.
Yeah, that was everybody but one.
Okay, who did the press go talk to? The one.
The one, right? That's funny.
That's where the story is.
That's funny.
We know what everybody else is thinking. They're in line. So
yeah.
let's go to that one that didn't vote for it. And
that's funny.
And now all of a sudden that opinion is what gets
what drives the
coverage and
discussion.
credibility. Yeah.
That's interesting. I know that there is a lot of partisan news coverage out there, right? And it's on both sides. I think that there's a lot of and I'm not saying, there are slants, and I'm not a big fan of the whole bias conversation because newsrooms are typically, this is just my view, but newsrooms are typically way more diverse than one particular slant. And obviously news leadership can choose, what they want to cover. But overall, I think that, like, New York Times is a good example. I think they get criticism from both sides. And I think that there's enough journalists at the New York Times where there's a wide range of coverage and experiences. And I think that's good for journalism. I want to know, just in terms of when there is partisan news coverage, do you see that as a barrier to bipartisanship?
there's partisanship, there's bias in everything.
Sure.
And you were talking about the leadership having to pick the stories or pick the that part of the spectrum that we're going to occupy. It doesn't make any. There's only so many minutes for a story in a newscast. There's only so many column inches. You can't put in all the facts, and so you have to pick and choose what facts that you put in the story to support the story that you're trying to tell.
Right. And these are all editorial decisions.
Right. And so that's all bias.
Right.
And so the question is, are we trying to give you as close a vision or an interpretation of what actually happened? Or are we trying to give you an interpretation that will lead you to a specific way of thinking? And I think that's where people start to get offended. Give me the information. I'm an adult. I can figure this out. As opposed to being fed a particular line repeatedly, and that just becomes the orthodoxy. That just becomes the common wisdom, the conventional wisdom.
Yeah, I think and I read this thing that said that, objectivity is kind of a myth, and I kind of agreed with it to a degree, because I think that everybody has their own experiences, and that's
Yeah.
why there's argument for making newsrooms more diverse and so everybody has different backgrounds that they can pull from, and maybe somebody's going to cover a story differently than somebody else would have, or if you
Yeah.
work together, you'll occupy more of a diverse spectrum on that belief. And I think there is some truth to that, though, because even the photographer who's taking a story, the way that they zoom in on a certain subject is going to be a decision that they make. Even
Sure.
this and the photographer is theoretically the most objective person in the newsroom, because they're just literally observing what happens.
And look what they do with the coloration or the patina or they can make someone nice smiling picture look downright evil with the right coloring and shadowing, right?
Yeah.
So even the most objective, straightforward approach, there's going to be information included, and there's going to be some information that's excluded.
Right.
And somebody might look at what was excluded and think that's more important than what was included. But that's just the way it is. I mean, none of us have time to know everything or read everything about everything. And so you just understand that this is the interpretation of the reporter that it wrote the story.
Right, and that's why I've always, and people, when I go to family gatherings, people always ask me, they're like, because they know my job, right? And they're always like questioning about the media, like, how should I be a better citizen? How should
Yeah.
I, indulge in media? And I'm always just like, there's no real secret. Just read as many different news articles as you can.
Yeah.
Read the New York Times, read the Washington Post. Whatever you read, just know what the background of what you're reading.
There's the old Will Rogers line. I don't know anything about it, just what I read in the paper. But one of the things I follow about 80 different people on X.
Okay.
Sociologists, psychologists.
That's it?
Economists, and that's
Okay.
and so you go and so I'm always interested in what they're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll repost a story, and then as you're reading the digital version of that story, they'll talk about some original source for the information, and then there's a link to that. Well, click the original source.
Find out what they said.
Go in and look, and that might introduce you to someone else you find interesting,
Right.
and then maybe you want to follow them, or even in that link, you go drill in, and there's another link, and so it gets you more and more into what's the basis of how this all got started, and sometimes what's said in the second or third layer in is not necessarily what's being reported in the original story. There's a component to it, there's a kernel of truth to it, but it's a little more subtle or a little more nuanced than maybe what's being presented.
Interesting. And Does your journalism training influence the way maybe you speak with constituents or even the way you might read legislation that's being passed?
My journalism training, it's like I almost had to get over it.
Okay, okay.
Because,
Why? Explain that.
when we were always the truth is your defense. Come to find out, the truth is not a bulletproof vest. and you can't be absolute. You can't be an absolutist about anything, Be- because there's always more to learn, right? And even if you think you have the right answer, technology changes, information changes, the public's tastes change, social culture changes, and and if that's changing, but you're holding on to what you see as the truth as your defense, um, then you could be getting further and further away from the people that you're trying to influence.
10 years from now,
Yeah.
what do you think would consider as a success for today's Michigan middle schooler? Just to give you a hypothetical. I mean, I'm thinking like, what would it be? Test scores, mental health outcomes, wages or business creation? Like if somebody is in middle school today, what do you think would be a success for
Well,
them?
10 years from now, there will be far stricter rules on internet media use in the classroom than what I'm proposing.
You think so?
Once the concept is introduced, everybody gets it and everybody wants more. The simplicity of it. Let kids be kids. Don't monetize their attention and then capture it through addictive algorithms. But most important for our kids, you hear about the Mississippi Miracle. They had one goal: read. Read by third grade, and then read at grade level. Be proficient in reading. You do that, a lot of things will fall into place for you as an adult. And people will say, well, what about, you're taking technology out of the schools. What about digital literacy? I'm not worried about digital literacy. We're ranked 44th in plain old literacy.
Right.
We got plenty of work to do there. But if you're a competent reader and your mind hasn't been sucked into the addictive algorithms of social media, you'll have better health. You've got good mental wellness, and you can read. You got a lot of opportunity in front of you, and that's the kind of person that an employer will train on exactly what they want done. That's a trainable, coachable individual.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Representative Tisdel. It was a pleasure.
It was a lot of fun. I appreciate that. It was great questioning, and we kind of went off on a couple of tangents, but that's okay.